Welcome to the Flying Octopus podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
One of the more challenging aspects of doing a podcast, like the one we're doing today, is we're kind of always at the mercy of breaking news. And when we record these podcasts, we do it the night before, we work on it that night, we edit it, we put it out the next day. But there's always that possibility of breaking news. And I don't think there's a fan base in hockey right now that's waiting for breaking news on two contracts. Two guys you may have heard of, Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, have still not signed. So my paranoia is now that I'm going to have to publish this podcast. And then as soon as that happens, I'm going to look out of the corner of my eye and just see that ticker scroll. Red Wings agree to Seider, Raymond contracts. And while I'm thinking about this with my paranoia, the first thing I'm thinking about is like, oh man, I got to remind myself to tell Tony and Devin, keep their phones on. Don't keep them on silent or vibrate, because if they sign, we're going to be right back here at you. So I found that was kind of funny to have to come after you guys if this contract does go down, because tomorrow's Friday and it's training camp's a week from today. So not a bad day to announce it. So anyway, welcome to episode 2 of the Flying Octopus podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Sabrin. I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Tony Wolak and Devin Little. Guys, we're here, man. Like I said, hockey's back. We got the Red Prospects games starting tomorrow, 2 games against Dallas. I'm fired up to see that. We're going to see Nate Danielson, Michael Nygaard, and the probably the thing that I'm most looking forward to is to hear the velvety tones of Ken Kell. It's always good hearing that voice. That's when officially hockey is back. So I'll definitely be watching that. You can stream those games on redwings.com. They have it on Facebook, YouTube. I believe the game starts at 6 o'clock on Saturday, 2:30 on Sunday. So I would tune in if you get the opportunity. Before we get into today's episode, guys, though, I do want to remind our listeners real quick where you can find us. Check us out and subscribe to our YouTube page at The Flying Octopod, and listen to us on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, people. And if you're not already, please follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at Flying Octopod. And also stay tuned for the end of today's show. We got some interesting announcements we want to make as in regards to future shows. So with that, guys, I'm ready to jump in. Devin, I want to start with you. Detroit's last 2 first-round picks, Michael Nygaard and Nate Danielson, are going to be the headliners there. But there's a lot of other noteworthy names on this roster. Who are you going to be keeping a close eye on this weekend? Like, who are you going to look out for? I'm curious.
There's a few names to keep an eye on, and I guess in interest of not doing what I usually do and steal all the good names and then pass it over to somebody else to pick up the scraps. I'll throw out a couple. We mentioned him a little bit on last week's show, Shai Bloom. I'm very, very interested to see how he looks in his first professional season. And I think that he is in a position to play a key role for the Red Wings at this mini tournament. I don't even know if you can really call it a tournament when there's just 2 teams participating, but I just based on the talent that's available that the Red Wings are bringing on the blue line, Bloom's the number 1 defenseman. So I'm looking at him to stand out in a big way and really kind of announce himself as someone to keep an eye on this season. If he doesn't look like the Red Wings' best defenseman at this tournament, it's either because one of these other guys is having a hell of a tournament and good on them, or it's because Bloom is not doing what he should be doing. And as a 2021 draftee, I'm expecting him to stand out among the crowd, really. And then another guy I'll throw out too is goaltender Carter Gielander. He's another one of those collegiate athletes that is kind of set to make his full-time pro debut this season. Played a game or 2 late with the Griffins last year. And then obviously we know with the Red Wings' crowded goaltending situation right now, I don't think he's destined for Grand Rapids quite yet this season, but he should play a key role in Toledo with the Walleye. And I think that a strong showing in the prospect showcase or tournament, whatever you want to call it, would kind of set him on the right track to do that. And for what it's worth, throughout his collegiate career, Nylander's been a really impressive goaltender. I think at one point in time, there were people that were more excited about him than they were about Sebastian Cossa, and that's saying something considering where they drafted Cossa. So, just a couple of guys that are expecting to make the leap to the pro level from the collegiate level. And if there's one thing that history has taught us, it's that's not a small leap. So hopefully, both of those guys are show well in their first kind of taste of semi NHL action. Tony, what about you? What kind of what guys are you looking out for at the against Dallas this weekend?
You're right on Carter Gylander. He's an interesting case because he was a late round draft pick. I think it was 7th round, a handful of years ago, 2019. So it's been a little while since he's been drafted. But luckily for him, for his development, he started for 4 years at Colgate University. And, when you're a goalie, ice time can be hard to come by, but it's the best thing for your development. And, for a 7th round pick, and especially a goalie, you don't find too many of those, making the jump, getting entry level contracts. And he was able to do so. So that kind of shows a testament to his work ethic, to how he performed for Colgate, and how valuable that ice time was for him. Other players that I'm going to be watching for this weekend, there's 2 that come to mind. First is Emmett Finney. He is another late round pick for the Red Wings and had just a breakthrough campaign last year playing in the WHL. He played for Kamloops and went from 35 points in 64 games during his draft year to 59 points in 62 games the year after. So almost a point per game, jumping from 9 goals to 19. He plays with a lot of energy, plays with some physicality. He's 6'1", but does kind of use his size to his advantage. And again, he got an entry level contract as a 7th round pick, not almost immediately, but like pretty soon after being drafted, which is rare to see. And then made the jump to the Griffins once his WHL season wrapped up and the Griffins were still going, got into 3 games and, didn't look too far out of place. So I'm really interested to see how his development progresses because it's already ahead of where we expect it to be. The other player is Jacob Brzezowski. He is the player signed from the Czech League. The Red Wings signed earlier in the offseason. Last year, he scored 26 goals in 51 games overseas, and now he's making the jump to North America. So I'm just kind of curious to see how he adapts to the smaller rink for the first time and if he doesn't look too out of place there. But I suspect that he'll be one of the better players on the team. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if him and Nate Danielson were on a line this season in Grand Rapids, given his shooting tendency and Danielson being more of a playmaker. Actually, those 2 and Michael Brandt-Nygaard, that would be a fun first line to watch in the 2 rookie games this weekend.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
And I'd like to point out too, for the first time of doing a show with Devin, he's actually left me some meat on the bone. So I'm going to take the easy answer here. And all eyes for me are going to be on MBN. We've seen all these preseason SHL videos. I mean, he doesn't look like he's too far away. And I know at the draft this year, they said he was one of the players that was probably the most NHL ready. And these videos he's got a shot, guys. He's got a big shot and he plays with tenacity and he's something that this team definitely needs. And I'm pretty sure the Red Wings brass, that all eyes are going to be on him this weekend. And I'm also interested to see too what Danielson looks like. I'm trying to see what he comes back at last year. Is he going to look bigger, stronger out there on the ice? Those are some of the things that I'm probably going to look forward to. But yeah, you mentioned Emmett Finney. That's another one. Those late round picks, man. That's how you build a good roster, and especially when you get those guys to hit. So I'm definitely going to be watching him as well. Real quickly, though, we have other prospects here, and you won't see any of the college prospects here for the Red Wings, and that's because due to an NCAA rule that once the school year starts, you can't participate in any pro camps. So, Devin, again, I'm coming back to you, and I'd like to hit on some of these prospects, starting off with the ones at Michigan State. Hopefully, Trey Augustine, hopefully a big part of this organization's future, as well as Red Savage, who was just recently named captain of the Spartans this year. So, Devin, give it to me.
Well, you led off with, I think, the big one, really, and that's Trey Augustine. I think that's the biggest reason why people are invested in Michigan State hockey, or at least Red Wings fans are invested in Michigan State hockey outside of maybe Michigan State alliances. If Sebastian Costa is not the goaltender of the future, then you got to hope that Trey Augustine is. And ideally, they're both goaltenders of the future. Uh, I Augustine had a really good year last year, honestly. It's a kind of a lucky situation where you're not hoping that he has like a breakout year or anything like that. You're honestly just hoping he kind of builds on what he did last year. Uh, at the collegiate level, he led Michigan State to their best season in a long time, and then he kind of followed that up every step of the way with just better and better performance. What really stood out to me was when he had to when he represented Team USA at the World Championships in the spring, had to step in for Alex Lyon when Alex Lyon had an issue with his hand, and he looked like he belonged in a tournament that is filled with NHL talent. If you're not on the Trey Augustine train after that, I don't know that you are ever going to get on it, but you definitely should be. One thing about Augustine that kind of maybe sets him apart from Costa outside of how excited we all are about them. Augustine's maybe more of like a technical goaltender, whereas Costa kind of relies on his sheer athletic gifts and ability. You want if Augustine is doing well, it's because he's cutting off angles. He's really mindful of his positioning, and he's just kind of gobbling up rebounds. He's not making crazy acrobatic saves. He's not doing the Dominic Hasek in the crease. He's just playing really smart. And that's kind of his strength. Now, that's not to say that Costa isn't as technical or doesn't have technical prowess. It's just that's not necessarily a strong suit. I think that Augustine is going to get as many starts as he can handle this year. And I think that there's a really good chance that if he does continue to build on what he did last year, we're going to be talking about him maybe joining the Griffins at the end of the season. And boy, would that be a lot of fun to have both Costa and Augustine and Grand Rapids to finish the year. Yeah,
He's just so calm in net. It's hard to find another prospect, especially in Detroit's history, who's just so calm and poised in net. He's always square on the puck. He's never looks like he's panicking out there. And even in the World Championships, playing against like NHL and world caliber players, he's cool as a cucumber in net. And that's just his game. Like you're saying, Kosa's more of the athletic type. He's long, limbs are going like all over the place, but it's just his style of game. It's a little bit more athletic. It's a little bit more in your face for a goalie. And then while they kind of play at similar depths in net, Augustine's he's just square. He tracks the puck so well, makes the cleanest crease adjustments I've seen for any Red Wings goalie prospect in a long time. His skating is just so good for how young he is and where he is at his career that when he gets to the NHL level, he's going to be able to just navigate the pace of play so much better because of how great and quick his skating is, just making those little movements around. It's something that kind of just goes unrecognized with goalies. It's like, how great's their glove? Like, are they strong at breakaways? Do they make flashy saves? How's their poke check? If you can just navigate around the crease just so effortlessly and so quickly, you're going to be extremely effective. And especially that while doing so, you have just the bottom part of the net covered. You're sound. It's I'm a huge fan, as you can tell. I am, of course, but you're right. I do think there is a distinct possibility that after Michigan State wraps up their season, that he turns pro. Just, I don't know what more he can gain from a third year of NCAA hockey, unless, of course, he wants to continue his education, get his degree, and all that, which is great. But if he turned pro, I don't think he looked too out of place in the AHL.
And to kind of just add on to your point about being cool as a cucumber, you just so rarely see him get rattled. Even when he has a bad game, it's the cliche. You always want your goalie to just kind of flush it and forget it, but Augustine does. And he doesn't. No matter what stage he's on, he doesn't really look like he's overmatched. He doesn't look like he doesn't belong. I've yet to see him compete in a game where I thought he was out of his depth. And maybe that's coming, but it's a real testament to just how sound and how far along he is already, that he just always looks like he belongs in the crease. And then staying with the Spartans, the other player that I imagine Red Wings fans are going to have their eye on is the newly named captain of the Spartans. That is Redmond Red Savage. And he's a player that I found myself really growing an appreciation for, honestly, since the Red Wings drafted him back in 2021. But he's one of those guys that he's a high competitor. Whoa, what do big surprise. The Red Wings drafted somebody with a high compete level, but boy, does Savage have that. He is a battler. There's a lot of Chris Draper in his game. He's a good, solid two-way centerman that, again, competes at both ends of the ice. Doesn't necessarily have a high level of offense to his game, but he can make some things happen in the offensive zone. But really, what makes him such a valuable player and why he's wearing the C for the Spartans this season is he's really just a tone setter. Even if he's not scoring goals or creating plays or whatever, he's going to do something to make an impact of the game. Maybe he's going to lay a big hit on somebody. Maybe he's going to muck it up along the boards. Maybe he's just going to be the guy that is kind of lifting up his teammates. Everybody needs that. Every team needs that guy, and Savage is also willing to be that guy. I love players with leadership qualities because those are things you can't teach. Those are one of those intangibles that you either have or you don't have. And I find that players that have those intangibles and tend to be leaders tend to have successful careers one way or another. And I think that Savage, to his credit, has earned that C that he's going to wear this season. And we talk about Augustine maybe heading to Grand Rapids at the end of Michigan State's season. I think that for Savage, he's in his senior year, so he's it's kind of time to make some decisions. I think what you want out of him is you want him to look like he's pro ready. I don't think you need him to look NHL ready. By all means, if he does, let's go. But you want him to look like he's ready to play professional hockey. Assumingly in Grand Rapids or the AHL next season. And if he looks like he's ready to go, you're feeling pretty good about what you've produced out of the Michigan State system. And honestly, just real quick before I wrap up, shout out to Adam Nightingale, a former Red Wings coach who's really helped turn that program around, because it wasn't too long ago that my Western Michigan Broncos were clearly a better hockey program than the Big Ten's Michigan State. And the fact that I can't confidently say that anymore, as much as it breaks my heart, it's probably how things should be. Michigan State's a very prestigious school, and it's a good thing that they have a good coach who has kind of revitalized that program. Remember, that's where a lot of good players have come out of that Michigan State program. So good on Adam Nightingale and anyone else who has contributed to kind of bringing that program back to life.
Yeah, and on a side note, Red Savage grew up. His father was Brian Savage, who was a pretty decent forward, played 12 seasons in the league, so he does have that NHL pedigree. There's a lot of other prospects and Red Wings draft picks that we're not going to see in this camp, Devin, and I want to get your opinion on some of those guys that you're looking at, and what can you tell us about them?
Yeah, there are definitely no shortage of Red Wings prospects playing at the collegiate level. Actually, kind of funny. We talk about, or we kind of know the Red Wings scouting team for kind of just farming Sweden and plucking a bunch of European players, but they do definitely have some boots on the ground at the collegiate level, because they do pick out of those, or they at least pick players that are already committed to play at the collegiate level, and they seem to have some sort of trust in the NCAA's ability to produce good hockey players. There's a few I want to talk about. There's 3 altogether, and we'll start honestly with some of the newer guys, 2 that were added in this summer's draft. I will start with Max Plant, who was a second round pick, picked 47th overall. And the reason why, well, there's a few reasons why I'd like to highlight him. Evan, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote an article on this kid. I think you're pretty high on him too. Um, I like the pick because of other picks they made. What do I mean by that? Well, their top pick was Michael Brandstad Nygaard. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, he's got a hell of a shot. And players who have a really good shot are really good. And what's really, really good is when you have players that can get them the puck. Some players are really good at shooting it. Some players are really good at passing it. Max Plant's really good at passing it. He's a really good playmaker. If he hits his ceiling, I think he's the type of player that you see hit 20 goals and 40 assists. Has a 2-to-1 ratio on assists. He's going to be setting things up more than he's going to be finishing them. But he's also, shocker, high competitor. He's not just going to hang out on the perimeter of the ice and try to set things up that way. He's going to battle for the puck, and he's going to try to get it, and he's going to take it to the middle of the ice. And if there's a play for him to finish, he's going to try to finish it. But if there's an open lane for a pass to one of his teammates, he's going to identify it and he's going to hit it. I think he's going to be one of the more fun players to track this season because of just honestly how he plays. I think there's maybe a smidge of Dylan Larkin in his game, and I do want to emphasize a smidge. He's not necessarily somebody I would draw as a comparable, but just how he attacks on the ice when he's on the ice and when he's trying to create offense, and just the overall fact that I would consider Larkin more of a playmaker than a play finisher. I say that knowing he has a few 30-goal seasons to his credit, but I digress. I think Plant's the type of guy that facilitates things and creates things and kind of leads the charge when he has the puck on his stick. And I'm really excited to see what he does this season at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And then to kind of wrap up the 2024 guys, I also want to look at defenseman John Whipple. The reason I want to talk about him is not only because he has a really cool name, but also because he, I think, is maybe flying a little under the radar in terms of 2024 draftees that the Red Wings had. He's kind of the classic stay-at-home defenseman. He was drafted in the 5th round. He is honestly just known for being able to basically manage the defensive zone. And what I mean by that is he leads attackers away from the slot. He's able to deflect passes and shots. He protects his goaltender. Shocker, that's what defensemen are supposed to do. I think he plays a very mindful game, and I think that's what you have to be if you're defensive defenseman, is very mindful. And I think that he plays an intelligent game, and I think that translates over time is going to kind of dictate what his ceiling is at the NHL level. When we're talking about 5th round picks, you don't usually expect him to be really much of anything, but I think he has the tools to be a really solid bottom pairing defenseman that just kind of erases mistakes or minimizes threats whenever he's on the ice. Kind of what everybody hoped that Gus Lindstrom would be back in the day. And even kind of what Olli Maatta is now, or at least what you kind of hope he is, or you want him to be. Just sound, and you're not expecting a whole lot of offense, and just kind of takes care of business in his own zone. I think Whipple has a lot of potential to be that type of defenseman. And for what it's worth, he's playing at the University of Minnesota this year, and I think that's another program that has a pretty good track record of producing NHL talent.
You know who he reminds me of? Former wing Nick Jensen. Like, similar playing style, not overly physical, not the biggest, not the strongest, heaviest, but just plays simply in the defensive zone, gets the job done, suppresses shots, keeps play to the outside. And yeah, not a ton of offense, but it's, I don't know. To me, I get it that you can, when you're evaluating prospects, you look at comparables, and you have that bias, that shortcut of, okay, they look like that person. That's not to say he's going to turn out to be a Nick Jensen. I just see, like, when I see John Whipple play, I can imagine in my head that he is trying to play a similar game as Nick Jensen because of that that sort of game made Jensen successful. It's kept him in the NHL for a long time now. But yeah, if Whipple hits the ceiling, then I could see him turning into a player like Jensen. And then just if I can jump in real quick here while we're talking about 2024 draft picks. One player I'm curious about, less so excited, but just curious about is Fisher Scott. Also, Brady Cleveland, both of them are playing at Colorado College this coming year. Just kind of curious to see how they develop there. I actually know their coach. He's a former goalie coach of mine, Chris Mayotte, and hoping that he can take their game and elevate it to the next level, because I think those two have a place in Detroit's future as well. Just may take a couple more years to get there. But Devin, what about Dylan James? It's been a little while since the Red Wings drafted him. He's been at North Dakota for a few years now. Do you still? His name doesn't often come up in like top 10 Red Wings prospects, but where do you see his future being?
Well, I'm going to pretend that I'm in a presidential debate and answer something else you said first, and then I'll get back to that. I I really am intrigued by Brady Cleveland this season. He's kind of unlike any other prospect in their pool as well, in that he's honestly just, if he's doing what you want Brady Cleveland to do, he's a pain in the you know what to play against. And he's a big dude on the blue line that just, he's not going to give you a whole lot of offense, but he's going to be insanely tough to play against. You want him to be kind of a defensive defenseman that has that physical element there. You talk about Whipple and Jensen being kind of that smart defenseman. A word that comes to mind is smooth. They just kind of, they facilitate and they skate and they defend in a very smooth manner, whereas Brady Cleveland's game is rough. He's trying to make things a little chaotic, and that's when he excels. Now, about Dylan James. Dylan James is, I think, entering a really crucial season for him as a potential professional hockey player. He might get kind of lost in the shuffle with all the names that have been added to this prospect pool over the last couple of years, but he was a second-round pick back in 2022, and he, again, fits the profile of a lot of Red Wings prospects. He battles hard. He kind of projects as like a middle six winger that has some offense and battles hard. So he can probably be depended on in his own end. But he, while playing for a really good University of North Dakota program, has not really.
He hasn't jumped.
Yeah, he hasn't had that breakout that you're maybe hoping for quite yet. Now, that being said, entering his junior season, I think he's primed for one. And he did finish last season very strong. And he's one of those guys that you enter the season thinking if he builds on where he was at last season, he's going to have a really good year. For him to have a good year, I think he needs to be a player that you notice more often than not whenever North Dakota plays. I think you want to see him score more than he has over his first two seasons. He only has 17 goals through his first two collegiate seasons. I think you want to see him definitely hit double digits, maybe hit 15 plus. That would be great. But if he's making an impact on a regular basis, if you aren't straining yourself to find him whenever you're watching North Dakota play, I think he's made progress. When you draft players with a top 50 pick, again, he was 40th overall 2 years ago, you expect them to become something. What that something is probably varies, but for James, I think you want him to start looking like a potential AHL, NHL player at the end of this year again. And like we kind of said with Augustine and a few others, maybe he still wants to stick out his collegiate career after this season because maybe he thinks that's what's best for him. Maybe he wants to pursue his degree. All of that's fine and dandy. But at the end of this season, I think you want him to be on the radar at the very least. I don't necessarily think he's on the radar right now, for better or for worse. But if he is on the radar when we're talking about this next spring, I think it's safe to say he had a good season.
Yeah, 35 points in 76 games for James. That's probably a little underwhelming for the organization. So I'm gonna have to agree with you guys. That's definitely a big year for Dylan James. One more note and a side note: Max Plant's father, Derek Plant, played 8 seasons in the NHL and is a Stanley Cup winner. So more guys with NHL pedigree. Yay! We are going to shift gears here now, and this is a segment that Tony pitched to me a few weeks ago, and it's something that I really take a lot of interest in this thing. There's so many nuances of the games, little things like behind the scenes from the business aspect of it that I don't really understand, and Tony's an expert at this. So Tony, why don't you start us off with this week's business of hockey?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So this week I want to talk about attribution. What does that mean? Like in the sales business world, attribution, it helps businesses determine like how impactful certain touch points are in like the sales and marketing funnel. So just to give a really rudimentary example, so you're scrolling through Instagram, you see a paid post by NHL.com for selling jerseys through Fanatics, but NHL.com has the ad. You click on it, you look at it. Okay, cool. Later on, you go to your computer, you're like, all right, let me go check that out again. You go to NHL.com, you look at the offer, you go to buy a jersey, but then just don't. You get distracted. It happens. You walk away. Next day, NHL sends you an email. It's called a cart abandoned email saying, hey, you left this in your cart. Do you want to buy it? And you're like, yeah, wanted that jersey. So you buy it. So attribution can be issued in a couple of different ways here. So there's last touch attribution, which would be the giving credit to the last marketing sales deliverable that you touch before making the purchase, which in that example is the email. Multi-touch attribution is giving credit to anything that you may have seen or engaged with along the way before you made that purchase. So the paid social posts, the website, and the email would all get like the partial credit. And then there's weighted multi-touch, which favors the last item that you saw and engaged with before making the purchase, but then the other things that you engaged with also get some credit as well. There's no right or wrong. Like different businesses use different attribution models. It's really up to what they think is best for their organization. But having kind of thinking about this in my day job, it made me wonder if the NHL might be going in that direction with the player movement and puck tracking that's been going on for a couple of years now. It's starting to see it more move into the mainstream, both through articles, blogs, NHL Edge. So I guess applying this to let's take a goal, for example. We'll talk about the last goal of the Red Wings season where David Perron scored with just a couple seconds left to send the game to overtime against the Canadiens. So the data that was collected from that goal at a basic level, the goal for Perron is an assist for Shane Gostisbehere, and then a 6-on-5 goal on ice goal for Larkin, Perron, Patrick Kane, Gostisbehere, Lucas Raymond, and Alex DeBrincat. That's it. So with considering the sort of attribution effect of it, shouldn't Larkin get some credit for not losing the faceoff that led to the goal, or Patrick Kane and Lucas Raymond tying up their checks to not allow the Canadiens to grab the puck when it was just kind of sitting in no man's land? Or maybe does Alex DeBrincat get some credit for crossing in front of Caden Primo's sight line right before Perron let the shot off? There's no right or wrong answer to that for any of those, but it does make you wonder that at some point we want to have more data about and more insights into just the plays that lead to goals. It may not be a great pass that's just a tap in for the goal, and maybe a play that happens 10 seconds before. Let's say Olli Mata clearing the puck out, making a great outlet pass to spring a forward for an odd man rush to the other way. With this player and puck tracking data, like we have the ability to capture this. It's just a matter of pulling out those insights and highlighting the impactful plays that may not be seen in the box score. So when you're watching Red Wings games this season, keep that in mind. Pay close attention when Mickey Redmond pulls out his telestrator, highlights plays, bingo, bango, up the boards, pass across, which play started that off to get the puck into the offensive zone and turned into a goal eventually. It's something I like to watch for, and it's something that we're going to have data and insights on probably in the near future with just the abilities that the data collection processes have now for the NHL. So just a thought. And if you have any thoughts on this yourself, give us a shout in the comments or on Twitter. Definitely curious about other types of plays that our listeners feel are maybe more underrated when it comes to creating opportunities, whether that's exiting the defensive zone, transitioning through the neutral zone, or anything like that.
All right, guys, running a little long here. Got to start wrapping things up, but I did want to hit some news and notes real quick from around the league. Quick hit here. Former Red Wing, Mark Stahl, if you can really actually call him or consider him a former Red Wing, played 2 seasons, 127 games with the Red Wings. He decided to hang him up. Pretty defective player. He's also probably the only member of the Stahl family that didn't win a Stanley Cup, and I'm sure they let him hear that at the Thanksgiving dinner. Big fan of the Stahl family. Pretty good players, had long careers in this league. So I don't think they in any way, shape, or form compared to the Hughes family, who also had some news today. Luke will miss 6 to 8 weeks, suffering a shoulder injury that he had earlier this month. They say it's not going to require surgery, but still, it's a pretty decent blow to the Devils back end, considering he could miss the first month. Their 2022 number 2 overall pick, Simon Nemec, was also hurt in preseason action this year, so he could be out. I look at this as the Devils are one of those teams that the Red Wings are going to be battling for to get into that playoff spot. So this is somewhat relevant news for the for the Devils, who are coming into the season with really high expectations. I mean, they really are. And Jack's battled some injuries, and they're getting that. It's got to get frustrating for that organization, because they do have the young talent there. They just got to get it ready to come together. So I'll be interesting to see what happens with them. ASP injury update read this week. He should be ready for the start of the season. He just missed the SHL preseason. We'll miss this weekend's Champions League games, but ASP is going to be okay. Really wish we were seeing him at camp this year, but that will not be the case. And last but not least, guys, something I really saw funny this week, and I want to start this segment as something that you love to see. Twitter, social media right now has just been so toxic. It's been worse than ever these past couple of months. And, I'm trying to find something good to end the show on. And I saw this, and I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this too, but I wanted to get your reactions and opinions to this real quickly. Roberto Luongo answered a Facebook ad page for a beer league goalie. And to explain this, as a beer league player, we have these pages out here, and even in LA, where we put out an ad, hey, we don't have a goalie for tonight. And, a lot of the times you meet new people who just show up just to play. Roberto Luongo did this for a beer league team in Florida that was in a playoff game against the 5-time defending champions. And he walked into the opposing team's locker room, and hey, there's your goalie, Roberto Luongo.
Ready, boys?
Here's our goalie, boys.
Hey, we need some defense, okay? Put some defense today.
He was is pretty funny, and they ended up winning 4-2. Can you imagine you're in a beer league and I don't know, Nick Lidstrom walks in or something. He's going to play for your defense that night. But Tony, how would you feel if you were on the other end of that team just losing? Because I mean, they were the 5-time champions who had already won, and now you're throwing in Luongo in the net.
I took that as a challenge, just wanting to do better than him that particular night. But we all know how that would probably turn out. I did think it was funny when he walked in and just kind of like, oh, hey guys, I'm your goalie tonight. Let's get some defense out there. I need some defense in front of me. Like, you're a future Hall of Famer, and you're like, yeah, guys, make sure you give me defense tonight. I'll be good otherwise. And it's like, it's super relatable, but also just how like nonchalant he is about it. It's hilarious. Check out the video if you haven't already.
Dude, hockey players are a different breed, man. And it's kind of cool because, you know, thinking if I was on that team, I would be like, well, we scored 2 goals on Roberto Luongo. So I think I would rather score on an NHL goalie in a beer league game than actually have my team advance in the playoffs. I mean, that's something that you tattoo on your arm or something. I don't know. All right, guys, we got to wrap this. It's getting late for me, man. It's almost bedtime for this old man. But I want to just remind everyone to find us on YouTube at the Flying Octopod channel, and follow us on Twitter at Flying Octopod. That would be great. And you can also find us on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you get all of your podcasts. Individually, you can follow us at Tony Wolak, at Hockey with Devin, and at Saber91. I did want to tease one thing for next week's show. We will be interviewing George Malik from the Malik Report. He will be in Traverse City at Red Wings training camp, and we're going to get to hit up George. And, we got boots on the ground there. So we're pretty excited to have him talk and discuss what he's seeing at training camp, any trends, any injuries that could come up. George is a guy who's been blogging about the Red Wings since 2006. So it's always good to have George on the show and get his perspective. He's a well-known Red Wings blogger, and he's pretty good at what he does. So with that, guys, that's two episodes in the books. Let's make sure you turn your phones on tonight in case Raymond Insider sign and I have to call you. Other than that, though, I'll see you boys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.